So, good evening, Dr. Mandar. It's wonderful to have you on the Digital Excellence Pharma Academy. You have a very impressive track record, infectious disease. How did you recognize this opportunity and tell us briefly about your journey as a medic and what are the key challenges that you face in infectious disease management?
So hi Anoop, it's been long overdue. Actually, we hadn't had a chat for a long time. So yes, infectious diseases, that's what you call the flavor of the month or the year or sort of the flavor of the decade now.
Right.
My interest in infectious diseases goes back actually to my graduation and post-graduation from St. GS Medical College and KEM Hospital in Mumbai, one of the very prestigious institutes for medical education in India. Fortunately, I would give the entire credit for my developing interests in infectious diseases to a wide variety of stalwarts whom I had as my teachers. So I am what my teachers made me. People like Dr. Lata Bichle, my head of the department, Dr. Dilip Karnad, a big name in critical care and infection diseases, and Dr. Anita Matthews, who's now spearheading the fight against COVID in Mumbai.
Right.
So these were my teachers who actually inculcated that idea and the interest in infectious diseases as a post-MD super specialty. When the routine specialties in demand were cardiology, nephrology, this was a new thing which was coming up. And unfortunately, when I was doing my post-graduation, we had the 2005 Mumbai rain deluge, followed by a huge wave of leptospirosis. And being in KEM Hospital as a medical registrar, we were right in the midst of it. So that was like my first infectious disease epidemic, which I had managed with all my colleagues and my teachers. That gave me an idea of epidemic or pandemic management. Later on, my extra focus was in virology. So virology those days was restricted only to hepatitis and HIV. So after my MD, I pursued virology and in infectious diseases as a subspecialty. And after my fellowship in infectious diseases, I got into the American Academy of HIV Medicine for accreditation. Fortunately, was accredited from the American Academy as an HIV specialist for India. So that is how the journey has been, at least academically for me. So the interest from developed from my teachers' encouragement, from the problems which are coming out, because post 2005 we have been having leptospira, dengue, and malaria waves in Mumbai every year on an annual basis. Now the biggest monster of them all, the pandemic COVID, SARS-CoV-2. So it brings full circle. It seems a prudent choice which I made by refusing cardiology, nephrology options and getting into infectious diseases. And now, over a period of time, it has bloomed into a very good specialty with a lot of good consultants, a lot of centers like Apollo Chennai having excellent programs in infectious diseases and promoting infectious diseases as a super specialty management. And yes, COVID is going to take this specialty back into the forefront because we are right in the center of COVID management. Then the same choice which you have after you decide you have had enough of academics, every doctor faces this choice as to when to say no to academics and get into practice. Practice was either corporate attachment or corporate attachment with a private practice. Private practice gives me the flexibility of also looking at community infectious diseases, where generally the corporate ID practice is more or less centered around ICUs and post-transplant problems and post-surgical issues. As a community ID person, I get to see the entire spectrum of any infection, right from a community level up to the ICU level. So I opted for having both of the kinds of practice in my daily routine. So I have an community ID practice in the form of my private practice, as well as a couple of corporate attachments. So that's how it's been.
So great. I think from leptospirosis to dengue to now COVID, you're right in the middle of it. Give us a sense of what are the real challenges that you're facing for the last 1 year, doctor.
Oh, COVID has really turned our world upside down. I mean, not just from a layman's perspective, but also from a medical practitioner's perspective. We have had to reorient the entire way we have been practicing, either in small clinics or in nursing homes or in big corporate hospitals. A slightly neglected part of medical practice, that is infection control and infection spread, has suddenly been brought into the forefront. Because even when a small general practitioner is practicing now in his clinic, he needs to be aware about the basic ways of making sure he does not contract the infection from his patient, neither does one of his patients transmit the infection to the next patient. So infection control has gained priority in all areas of medical practice now. So all small clinics like us, or even corporate hospitals where we go, had to invest a lot into your sanitization, disinfection, social distancing, your PPE kits, even for the receptionist or the assistant, who's actually the first contact person rather than the doctor whenever a patient arrives. So a very neglected part of, say, infection control has come into the forefront, and it has actually become of paramount importance. So that is something which has drastically changed in the last 2 years. As far as patient interaction goes, yes, unfortunately, the amount of time we would have spent with each patient inside the consultation room has contracted. So the patients who are our old patients tend to understand this immediately. Doctor, you're giving less time to us now that the pandemic is on. So we have to convince them that it is for their own safety that we are doing it, so that they don't stay in clinic for a long time exposed to other patients. But yes, patient interaction has also changed. A lot of places, interaction has become remote, and as a person who cleanly watches and promotes telemedicine and teleconsultation, you would be aware there are new avenues which have come up so as to communicate with your patient. That does not take away the physical examination part, which is more important, but in a compromised healthcare setup which we have right now because of the pandemic, telemedicine is adding a new dimension to our way of interaction with patients and patient relatives, and a safe way to interact with them, safe for both the medical practitioners as well as the patients and their caregivers. So that is something to which we have had to reorient ourselves to. So infection control, telemedicine, those are the two radical changes in the last, say, 1.5 years, which we have got used to. One very different thing which has come up is that since this is an ongoing pandemic, and we are learning every day something new about this virus and the way it affects the body, and vaccines and different vaccines, and one day one vaccine is better than the other day the other is better than the second one. We have learned that we have to keep a track of the information which is available now in real time. Some things which were true yesterday might not be true today. So most of the medical practitioners have to go back, go online, do their CMEs, look at medical updating software, go back and keep a watch on Lancet, NEGM, and other articles on a daily basis to see if something which they are practicing today was actually changed yesterday, and whether what you're giving right now as supposed therapy is something which is good or bad. So the advices are also changing. So this is a new dimension which has COVID has added, that you have to be very well aware as to what is changing in terms of guidelines every day. So as WHO rightly calls it, WHO calls it a living guideline. So it changes every moment. So you have to keep a watch on what has changed in that living guideline when you practice. So that is something new which has come. Otherwise, we were used to, I mean, most in our NCDs, we know annually something new report will come. JNC 7, JNC 8 will come after a year or so, a year or two. So for that year, we knew that our practice is going to be more or less the same. COVID has changed all that. COVID has made that, okay, in the morning what you're practicing, maybe by evening the guidelines changes.
Right. Great. So infection control has gained prominence, and hopefully the new measures of sanitization, beginning with receptionists going straight to the ICU, I hope these practices will become a part and parcel of the future, and hopefully, ensure that all of us are doing better hygiene practices. And then the advent of technology in a big way, that to both to interact with your patients and then to update yourself almost on a daily basis. So these are some changes that physicians are encountering. So how do you see telehealth and digital therapeutics, doctor? How do you think they will impact doctors as well as patients? Because you are experiencing difficulty with interacting with patients. Yes, you certainly would like to see them in person, but when these options are difficult, especially now that we are living with COVID and we don't see an end at the tunnel, and there could be lockdowns and restrictions on travel, how do you look at these tools helping you as a doctor and helping patients also?
Telehealth and digital therapeutics, actually, these two areas have flourished and will flourish more post advent of COVID. Because even pre-COVID, we had telemedicine, teleconsults, but they were restricted to a very select group of people and a very select group of consultants who were tech savvy, a select group of elite people who didn't have time to visit their doctors, or a migratory kind of a tech crowd who were new to that particular city and didn't have their routine general practitioner or a routine family physician. So those were the crowd which was doing telehealth and teleconsult prior to COVID. Post COVID, almost everyone wants to do a teleconsult because there is no access to physical access to their doctor. Either the physical access is blocked because of lockdowns and restrictions, or the physical access has been terminated by the doctor himself who would like lesser crowd at his clinics. So telehealth has come up as a very good alternative, though compromised in some cases, but it has come as an alternative to at least something is better than nothing.
Right.
Rather than zero healthcare, it is still a better option of getting healthcare. So this is going to be the norm at least for quite some time till the COVID waves eventually die out. We don't know when they will die out, but till physical consultation is not possible or people will not encourage physical consultation, telehealth is here to stay. Now, whether that practice will continue post-COVID is something only time would say, because there is a huge amount of population which has entered, which are now seeking telehealth out of no choice, not by choice. So a lot of doctors have also migrated to this telehealth platform, who would again migrate out as soon as physical consultation is available. And a lot of patients and caregivers who are also utilizing telehealth platforms right now would move out of it once their doctor is available physically in the chamber. So I am looking at it right now from a very short-term perspective. As far as purely COVID management goes, I would rather prefer doing a teleconsultation with a doctor who's seeing the patient rather than the patient itself.
Right.
Because in COVID, there is a lot of technical issues. There is a lot of physical parameters which we would like to see to tell that to whether the patient should continue to be at home or should be rushed to a hospital. Especially now, since the hospital beds are scarcity, the ICUs are pretty scarce. So I would ideally prefer to consult a doctor, a physician, or a general practitioner who's actually physically looking after a patient. But since we don't have the luxury, we are bypassing all that and reaching directly to the patients and the caregivers, where the technical aspect part has to be managed by digital therapy instruments. So a pulse oximeter, a digital thermometer, a digital BP instrument, and if possible, a glucometer has become the first prescription which you give before you start prescribing the meds. So a typical telehealth teleconsult for a COVID patient would first buy a pulse oximeter, buy a thermometer. So post that your instructions would start, because that is the crux. If we do not get those data, we will not be able to give any advice using any remote media. So accordingly, our patients have also got tech savvy and they're very used to using all these digital instruments now, which is a good thing, though it adds to the cost of the household. But then, as I said, it is always better to have some monitoring rather than to totally have an unmonitored COVID patient at home. So digital consultation, digital instruments, people getting a bit more tech savvy, digital savvy. Pre-COVID eras, I remember when we used to ask a patient when they say we had fever, and they said, have you measured your fever? And we don't have a thermometer. So that used to be the most common answer. Now, fortunately, if you ask them on a teleconsult what is an oxygen, they'll send you a picture of their pulse oximeter on their finger. So COVID has changed things a lot. The acceptance of all these devices by general people has also increased. No one would hesitate now to. Diabetics previously used to hesitate to buy glucometers, but a COVID diabetic now doesn't hesitate to buy any of the instruments. So in a way, it is good that remote monitoring is also possible, and telehealth has actually made managing this pandemic quite easy, because around 80 to 85% population are mildly symptomatic or asymptomatic, and they are at home quarantine, and we are able to cater to this without getting them out on the streets and into the chambers, so that we can concentrate our resources on the really sick people. Imagine if telehealth was not there and all these 85% people were out in the city, look in doctor clinics and GP clinics and in hospitals. Imagine the degree of spread which would have been. So telehealth has actually helped us to contain all these people inside their house, what we call as home quarantine, and indirectly also curtail the spread of the disease. So that has come as a really big boom to us.
Great. It's wonderful to know that telehealth has really contributed a lot to not only the interactions in difficult times, but also to actually stemming the tide of infections, and that patients are now more tech savvy. And I know that once you get a gadget, it's very difficult to do away with it. Hopefully, they will use these wearables. And I think that even the greater advantage that given that something like infectious disease is not such a widespread specialty that's available everywhere. I think going forward, patients from anywhere from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 city and their doctor can consult with you and be able to access good medical advice. So that I think is one of the advantages that which will make us to use telemedicine even going forward. So in terms of drug information, CME, what are your expectations from pharma doctor? You just said that one has to keep reading on a daily basis because the guidelines are changing, the trial outcomes are throwing up new results. So I mean, I know that pharma is more than happy just to stand outside the door and give you brand reminders. But as a clinician who is now challenged for time, challenged to access these resources, what are your expectations from the pharma companies, doctor?
I would like to take this question from one of your questions face value as to what do you expect from pharma. In terms of drug information and CME, see, it becomes a very small percentage of Indian pharma companies are actually involved as of now in catering to the COVID pandemic. Since COVID doesn't have a lot of pharmaceutical options, we land up with a very small group of pharmaceutical companies who would actually have some stake in COVID management in terms of their products, and hence would be open to providing information and changing guidelines related to COVID per se. Still, a vast majority of Indian pharma are with NCDs, cardiac issues, diabetes, neuropsychiatric, anti-infectives, and critical care was anyways fading out pre-pandemic.
Right.
So we were left with hardly a small select group of people who were into critical care and anti-infectives, and within that subgroup, a very small group of pharma who have, say, remdesivir, who have tocilizumab, or who have other drugs like doxycycline, ivermectin, which are being used rampantly for COVID right now. Maybe none of them have effect, maybe some of them have effect. We don't know that yet. But then there was a very small group. So that group is trying their level best to keep their doctors updated with information, especially related to the product which they have. But then a vast group of pharma, and in this pandemic times, is still clueless. I would say they're clueless as to their doctor is totally oriented, be it a cardiologist, neurologist, diabetologist, nephrologist. Their orientation has become all their specialty with COVID. And the information with the traditional information which this pharma still is providing is just hardcore information related to diabetes and HbA1c or cardiac outcome and acute coronary syndromes. So somehow they have what even the doctors expect from them is to give us an orientation of that specialty with an add-on COVID information. That is somewhere where I think is lacking. So even for example, say a cardiologist. A cardiologist wants to know as to what is the incidence of ACS in COVID patient, and whether he has to do urgent revascularization or does he postpone revascularization procedures in a COVID patient with an acute coronary event. So this COVID-oriented material is lacking from the pharma companies in terms of either drug information or procedure information or just purely CME. So I think the rest of the pharma pack has to now reorient their information which they are sharing from the usual traditional LBLs to LBLs now oriented towards COVID also. Though not directly COVID management, but then how COVID affects that respective specialty and outcomes in that specialty.
Great. I hope that pharma companies are listening to what you are saying and will adopt those changes so that the physicians are helped in managing their patients better, whether they have NCDs. And now with the challenge of COVID, how do they manage this patients differently, and what information is useful to them?
Because frankly, what has happened is that in the first wave, when we started last year, and there was this big boom of online seminars and webinars, like
Yes.
2 to 3 seminar webinars every day. Everyone is fatigued. As we are fatigued of COVID, now everyone is fatigued about those webinars and seminars also.
Yeah.
Now, you must have seen the frequency of those seminars plummeting down just the way COVID had falsely plummeted some months back.
Right.
So that is one way which I think the audience is not now much keen on these webinars.
Absolutely.
Because the information there is now saturated and they are looking for all these other specialty information related to their practice. So I think the brand managers and the content managers in the industry will have to now reorient themselves to COVID very soon. They have already late, but then they will have to reorient very soon.
Absolutely. I think pharma's understanding of digital was very basic. So what was there in the paper, they have just managed to put it into, the digital formats like webinar, WhatsApp messages. But they need to understand that digitalization is something much more deeper than that. And, those of us consumers who have experienced an app like Ola now no longer depend on the yellow cabs in Bombay or any other city. And despite the shutdowns and lockdowns, we have been able to use apps like Swiggy and Zomato and Dunzo and so many other apps. I think our life now revolves around so many apps that give us the essential services. So too, I think pharma needs to understand to create those multi-channel platforms where a busy doctor is not forced to attend a webinar at a particular time, but he can access information of his interest from his preferred channels. But it's about 10 years, doctor, since we've met, and I've always known you as a doctor who has been very empathetic in the approach to medical reps, talking to them, finding out their challenges, difficulties. What changes do you wish to see in their interaction with clinicians and other healthcare workers, including, as you said, the receptionist is the first person who the patient meets. So some amount of information is needed at all levels. So what changes do you expect from the pharma people?
I would answer that somewhat differently. Rather than what changes do I wish to see in their interactions, we are speaking in times when the second wave of COVID is just surging, and it is surging rapidly. At this point of time, what I look at, I would relate it to like my own family. Everywhere, if you see in financial sectors, they talk about capital preservation. Even though you don't get profit in the share market, even if there are times when if you can at least preserve your capital, that's good enough. I am looking at my family in COVID times in the same way. Okay. Even if I make sure that even having a COVID practice, if I keep my senior citizen parents away from COVID, that is good enough. Even if my profitability is not much, or even if there is attrition in my patients. But if I manage to keep the seniors of my family safe and sound, I think that this 2 years would be worth it. Similarly, I think an approach from the pharma majors looking at their sales representative as their capital and as their principal, which needs to be preserved and which needs to be nurtured during this deadly pandemic, that has come into the forefront. It is not how many calls you do and not how much revenue you have generated from a particular doctor in this bad time, but I think How many medical reps did you save from COVID or contracting COVID, or how many managers were touring all across India who did not get COVID? That should be the parameter in this point of time. So rather than their interaction with clinicians, I would first ask the pharma bosses and the pharma HR people to take care of their field force personnel and the frontline managers and their managers who are all the ways touring across India. First, take care of their health. Unfortunately, there have been instances which we have been hearing on social media and through word by mouth of quite a bit of young people in different parts of India succumbing to COVID, pharma managers, zonal managers who were not attended to, who did not get a bed on time in spite of being in this field. It is not that we don't consider them a part of a medical field, but if you get a call from a medical rep saying that, okay, there's a rep who needs a bed or a rep's mother who needs a bed, everyone gives priority to that. So in spite of all this, the first thing is take care of your principal, that is your manpower, take care of their health, take care of their family's health, and make sure that they do not indulge in any practices, or they are not forced to indulge in any practices which will put them at a risk for COVID. Second big thing which I think pharma failed, and I don't know why they did it, is they did not get pharma sales personnel grouped into frontline workers. By not getting them grouped into frontline workers, these young guys did not get vaccinated. And as you know, by age criteria, majority of them would be under 45, will not get vaccinated as per now. I would have loved to see pharma lobby. They lobby all the time. All of pharma organizations lobby all the time against price control. But this was a time when they could have lobbied to get all medical reps, managers, and all field force personnel as frontline workers. And it's not false. They have worked the entire pandemic making sure all the drugs were available at the stockists, all the drugs were reaching the chemists, all the information was reaching to the prescribers. So they were actually frontline workers, but they were not grouped as frontline workers. One of the biggest problems is they could not get vaccinated. And that is the biggest risk now. You have a large unvaccinated young population daily entering healthcare premises, which are potentially infected. They have no immunity, and they are armed only with a flimsy mask, and they're doing about their duties. I feel really sad, and many times I shout at my reps for coming with a very flimsy mask. They might take it the wrong way, but it is totally out of concern that it should actually be safe, and they should not carry the disease back home to the family members. With all this background and with all these risks inherent to a medical rep's job, now when you have to visit a doctor, I think it would be prudent to leave it at an individual doctor as to how you would like to have the interaction. If someone would still want to have an in-clinic interaction, you might as well do it. Use all COVID appropriate behavior, carry your own sanitizer, disinfectant, carry 2 sets of masks with you, change your soiled mask, change your sweaty mask. Don't use that sweaty mask throughout the day because you will catch another infection with that. If at all your doctor wants you to meet outside the clinic in an open air atmosphere, as I do, I have stopped in clinic calls. I now gather most of my reps downstairs under a tree near my car park, where there is a lot of wind blowing, where people can be easily distanced rather than my small clinic. Use that as an opportunity. See whether your doctor now wants an in-depth call, or he wants just a small 30-second call or a 2-minute call, and cater yourself to that doctor's wishes and get out of that high-risk situation immediately. That is how I want the interaction with me. Keep it personalized, keep it short and crisp, and do the interaction following all safety measures. No doctor is going to scold you for using safety measures in front of you, and no sales are going to get affected. They'll be rather happy that the reps are showing some degree of concern for the doctor's health and the personal health. So that is where I would see the interaction way: personalized, short and crisp, and following all safety measures.
Great. I think you have given some insights which even pharma people have not been able to give. That is that they need to look at how they can preserve their capital, and human resource is the biggest capital that an organization has. And many of these reps and field managers have been in the system for 10, 15, 20 years, and they have valuable knowledge residing within them. So instead of pushing them to the field which has got high risk, at this time to nurture them and take care of them. And then, as you very well said, there are large organizations like OPPI, IDMA, and so many other organizations which have got a lot of clout. And as you rightly said, they do a lot of lobbying, and sadly they have not included their frontline people to be categorized as somebody who's in the health frontline, because they're ensuring also the supply of drugs, that drugs are available at the chemists and at the hospitals, and therefore they need to be vaccinated before they can be sent onto the field. I hope the pharma people listening to this will take your advice in all earnestness, doctor. So yes, we have been discussing this. So where do you think, doctor, the digital adoption by doctors? Telehealth is only one aspect of it, and as you said that you're looking online at various resources. But if we look at the West, there has been a lot of changes in the last few years. There have been platforms like Sermo, Doximity, which are peer-to-peer closed groups of physicians only groups. And there are some of them in India as well, like DocPlexus and Curify and so on, which help doctor to, voice out his concern, exchange ideas, in addition to reading whatever latest is there. So from the doctor's perspective, how do you think print has now somehow lost its charm? You don't want to receive anything on which, there can be some amount of risk, and as well as patients, as you rightly said, that they have got used to some gadgets, and going forwards, it could be more wearables, it could be continuous glucose monitoring apps that they could have. So what's the current scenario, and what's the way ahead in terms of technology adoption?
According to me, it's again a very personal choice issue. We are all being forced to adopt digital in our interaction with our patients because of this sudden COVID pandemic. What happens post-COVID pandemic? Maybe a couple of years, one day COVID has to go. What happens after that to the digitally oriented patients as well as doctors? Only time will tell. How many will still stick to it as the next big thing in healthcare? We don't know. Inherently, what are the issues which doctors face with digital? One always has been the business part of it, the revenue sharing, which generally comes up with most of the patient appointment apps or the patient management websites and the big names. So revenue sharing was always one of the problems. Secondly, no one likes a big subscription, and no one hates paying for subscription like doctors. I'll be candid in that. So paying a hefty amount so that only when a particular specialty is searched, so you are the first search result to pop up. No one would like to pay a lot of money for that. People would rather like to have a free search engine. Third thing is that those who are really serious about their credentials and practice generally try to shy away from these platforms, primarily because they find all other specialties listed under them. For example, a renowned diabetologist, when he types diabetologist in, say, Bangalore city, and he finds that in the same list there is an MBBS person who's been shown as having equal credentials. In the same list, there's an endocrinologist who's been claiming as a diabetologist. The same list, there will also be an Ayurvedic guy who's been shown as a diabetologist. So this credential verification at the end by the digital platforms is very poor. So for me, for my specialty, say infections, if I put in infectious diseases Mumbai, and I'll see everyone who has themselves typed in that IC infection pops up as a specialist. So many a times doctors who are kind of very insecure or very proud of their credentials would not like to enter these platforms, because they say that I have been grouped with almost Tom, Dick and Harry and everyone. So this credential verification before putting up an ad is something which most of the platforms lack. And you have been a stalwart in this field and interacting with so many doctors, you'll find most of doctors boards having physician, cardiologist, diabetologist, infectious diseases, rheumatologist, all grouped under one name. So the same super specialties come up in your digital platform. So your MBBS will be grouped as an equivalent with an DM endocrine, and you will very well know how much a DM endocrine will hate that. So that is where a long-term digital adoption by doctors may be a problem. Digital adoption is very good in corporate hospitals where they have their own platforms. Like their doctors get an additional revenue or additional patients whom they would have missed out by not coming. So for example, let's take a very rough example of say Apollo. So Apollo doctors who are sitting in the OPD will have an add-on teleconsult OPD. So they won't mind it because they know everything, their credentials have been verified. They are going to get access to a good quality client, and the client is going to get access to a good quality doctor. So that is fine. But the same guy being out on say any other digital platform or say like Just Dial or Practo, he has to face competition from the next door general practitioner for being a diabetologist. So that is where the adoption is going to be difficult. Similarly, as a corollary for the patients also, for a patient who is not going to put in a very technical search term. So he is not going to put a virologist. He is going to just put in say an infection management person or a fever specialist. So for him to decipher from the list of 20, 30 odd people who comes, who's actually the really qualified fever specialist is kind of difficult because that knowledge, that awareness is not there in our lay population. So by chance, someone might land up visiting the right person, while by chance someone would land up visiting a person who is just advertised for the sake of it. That's where the experience kind of sours out for both the stakeholders, for the doctors also and for the patients also. So till digital platforms start verifying the credentials and giving the right kind of popping up the right kind of search results for the patient, this is always going to be a big problem, which is going to make us stay away from digital adoption.
Great. Those are very, very valuable insights coming from clinicians' perspective. I think many times when the techies develop a platform, their main goal is to get the investors' money in and large numbers in. But that works against the interests of the doctors. And doctors are right in being, wanting not to be bunched with anybody, because as you yourself have toiled so hard to specialize in a very niche subspecialty, so also everybody has worked, and they certainly would not like to be bunched along with the other doctors who are not of their specialty. So I think these insights that you have provided should help both the pharma companies to solve these problems and make digital a viable tool for both physicians, clinicians, as well as for the patients when they go searching for information. So that's wonderful, doctor, talking to you all this time. Have a wonderful.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure chatting with you, Anup.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just waiting for COVID to get over and we can have a nice cup of coffee in Diana.
Yes, we'll do that. That's for those of you who are new, Diana is the most famous Gadbad restaurant in Udupi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.